Imagine a country so wealthy that European immigrants didn't dream of going to America. They dreamed of going there. A country with more miles of railroad than most of Europe. A country whose capital city was called the Paris of the South, not as a compliment, but as a simple statement of fact. Now imagine that same country defaulting on its debt 9 times. 9. That country is Argentina, and its story is one of the most dramatic, heartbreaking, and consequential economic collapses in human history. To understand what Argentina lost, you first have to understand what Argentina had. In the early 1900s, Argentina was not a developing nation. It was a global powerhouse. The vast, fertile plains of the Pampas, stretching across hundreds of thousands of square miles, were producing grain and beef at a scale the world had never seen. Argentina was feeding Europe, literally. British capital was flooding in. Infrastructure was being built at breakneck speed. Buenos Aires had one of the first subway systems in the Southern Hemisphere. The country had a literacy rate that rivaled the United States. In 1913, Argentina's GDP per capita was higher than France, Germany, and Italy. It was in the top 10 wealthiest nations on Earth. Economists at the time didn't ask whether Argentina would become a great power. They assumed it already was. The question was simply, how great? The answer, it turned out, depended entirely on choices. And Argentina was about to make the wrong ones over and over again for the next 100 years. The first fracture came quietly, as fractures often do. Argentina's early wealth was built on a single, fragile foundation: exporting raw materials, beef, grain, wool. As long as global demand was high and prices were strong, everything worked. But this was not an economy built on industry, innovation, or internal strength. It was an economy built on geography and luck. When global commodity prices fell after World War I, Argentina felt it immediately. The buffer wasn't there. The industrial base wasn't there. But instead of adapting, Argentina's political class doubled down. Subsidies, protectionism, state intervention, each short-term fix created a long-term dependency. And beneath the economic strain, political tension was building like steam in a sealed pipe. In 1930, that pipe burst. Argentina suffered its first military coup. It would not be its last. Over the next 5 decades, the military would seize power 6 times. Each coup brought instability. Each instability brought capital flight. Each flight of capital brought economic contraction. It was a cycle, and Argentina couldn't break it. Then came the figure who would define Argentina's economic identity for generations, a man whose name, even today, splits a room. Juan Perón came to power in 1946, riding a wave of genuine popular love. He was charismatic, commanding, and he spoke directly to the workers, the poor, the forgotten. His wife, Eva Evita, became an icon. Together, they represented something Argentina's poor had never felt before, that the state was on their side. And in many ways, it was. Perón raised wages. He nationalized industries. He expanded workers' rights. He built hospitals and schools. For the descamisados, the shirtless ones, the working class Perón was a savior. But salvation has a price. Perón nationalized the central bank. He seized foreign-owned railways and utilities. He raised government spending dramatically, while simultaneously closing Argentina off from foreign trade. He was building a self-sufficient Argentina, an Argentina that didn't need the world. The problem was, it did. By the early 1950s, the cracks were becoming craters. Inflation was rising. Foreign currency reserves were draining. The agricultural sector, the very foundation of Argentine wealth, was being taxed so heavily to fund industrial ambitions that farmers were producing less. Exports dropped. The trade surplus that had once been Argentina's pride became a deficit. Perón was ousted in 1955, but Peronism didn't die with his presidency. It became something more dangerous than a government. It became an identity. Argentina would spend the next 4 decades swinging violently between Peronist and anti-Peronist governments, between left and right, between military and civilian rule, unable to maintain any consistent economic policy long enough for it to actually work. Every new government inherited the last one's debt and added its own. Inflation became a permanent feature of Argentine life, not a crisis, but a condition. By the 1980s, Argentines were so accustomed to rising prices that they had developed an instinct for it. You bought things immediately, because tomorrow they would cost more. You held dollars, not pesos. You didn't save. Saving was for people whose currency held its value. Then came 1989. Inflation didn't just rise, it exploded. Hyperinflation hit 3,000% in a single year. Store owners changed prices midday. Workers demanded to be paid in cash so they could spend their wages before lunch. The social contract, the basic agreement that a currency means something, completely collapsed. Argentina tried to fix this, and for a moment, it looked like it had. In 1991, Economy Minister Domingo Cavallo introduced the Convertibility Plan, a bold, radical move that pegged the Argentine peso directly to the US dollar, 1-to-1. You could walk into any bank and exchange a peso for $1, no questions asked. It was a hard constraint, a straitjacket designed to force discipline on a government that had spent decades proving it had none. And it worked. Inflation disappeared almost overnight. Foreign investment returned. Growth resumed. Argentina was, once again, being celebrated as a model, an emerging market miracle. The proof that a developing country could reinvent itself. But the straitjacket hid a deeper problem. When you tie your currency to the dollar, you give up control of your monetary policy. You can't devalue to make your exports cheaper. You can't print money to manage a downturn. You are locked in, and if the world changes around you, you cannot adjust. Through the late 1990s, the world did change. Brazil devalued its currency. The dollar strengthened globally. Argentine exports became expensive and uncompetitive. The economy began to slow. Unemployment rose. And to maintain the peg, Argentina kept borrowing from banks, from the IMF, from anyone who would lend. By 2001, the debt was unpayable. Everyone knew it. The only question was when and how badly. The answer came in December. Faced with a bank run, the government froze all bank accounts in a measure Argentines called the corralito, the little fence. Ordinary people couldn't access their own savings. The streets of Buenos Aires erupted. Protests turned to riots. 5 presidents resigned in 2 weeks. And on December 23, 2001, Argentina announced the largest sovereign debt default in history at the time, over $100 billion. The years that followed were brutal and then, strangely, resilient. Argentina abandoned the peg. The peso lost 2/3 of its value almost immediately. Poverty surged. The middle-class people who had saved in pesos, who had followed the rules, was wiped out. An entire generation lost faith in the system. And yet, Argentina survived. A commodity boom in the mid-2000s, fueled by Chinese demand for Argentine soy, brought growth back. Poverty fell. Wages rose. Argentina restructured its debt. It wasn't recovery in the textbook sense, it was survival with momentum. But the structural problems never went away. Inflation crept back. Populist spending returned. The peso weakened again and again. By 2023, annual inflation had exceeded 200%. Argentina elected a radical libertarian economist as president, a man who literally campaigned with a chainsaw, promising to cut the state to its bones. Whether it works remains to be seen. But the fact that Argentines turned to him tells you everything about how exhausted they are. So, what do you take from this? Argentina's collapse wasn't caused by one bad leader, one bad policy, or one bad decade. It was caused by a century of choosing short-term comfort over long-term strength, of using the state to solve today's problem in ways that guaranteed tomorrow's crisis, of building an economy on what the land provided rather than what the people could build, of letting political identity override economic reality again and again and again. Argentina is not a cautionary tale about one country. It is a mirror. Every decision Argentina made, the easy subsidy, the convenient nationalization, the currency manipulation, the borrowed time, these are decisions that governments everywhere face. Most choose the easier path. Argentina just chose it more often and paid a longer price. The Paris of the South is still there. The architecture is still stunning. The culture is still electric. The people are still, somehow, hopeful. But the wealth is gone, and the lesson it left behind is one the whole world should read.